That's how long it took for the F-35's flight computer to die screaming during the pre-flight diagnostic. 17 seconds for $80 million of American superiority to turn into the world's most expensive scrap metal. The engineering team stood frozen, their hands shaking as they watched digital blood pour down their screens. Protocol said to call Edwards Air Force Base for technical support. Protocol said to ground the aircraft pending full system analysis. But the quiet contractor in the corner didn't follow protocol. She walked to the maintenance terminal and began typing commands that made the lead engineer's blood run cold. Have you ever witnessed a moment when everything you thought you knew about someone completely shattered? When quiet competence revealed itself as something far more dangerous? Share your thoughts below, because what happened next at Naval Air Station Oceana would rewrite everything these Navy personnel believed about the unassuming woman they dismissed as just another civilian contractor. The morning fog had barely lifted from the Virginia coastline when Zara Wolfe arrived at Naval Air Station Oceana. At 44, she moved with the deadly grace of someone who'd learned that surviving meant never being seen coming. Her contractor badge hung like a lie from her neck, a carefully crafted fiction that had protected her for 12 years. She'd perfected the art of invisibility. The Honda Civic she drove screamed suburban anonymity. Her clothes were carefully chosen to suggest competence without authority. Even her posture was calculated, confident enough to belong, humble enough to be overlooked. This was an accident. This was survival. The security guard barely glanced at her credentials as she passed through the checkpoint. "Morning, ma'am," he said with the bored politeness reserved for the endless stream of contractors who kept the military machine running. Just another tech worker, another face in the crowd. That was exactly what Zara needed him to think. Hangar 7 was the F-35 Lightning II nerve center, a cathedral of American technological supremacy. Inside, stealth fighters sat surrounded by diagnostic equipment worth more than most small countries' defense budgets. The air hummed with the quiet intensity of people working on machines that could reshape the balance of global power. Technicians clustered around computer panels, their faces illuminated by screens showing system diagnostics. Engineers reviewed performance data with the focused attention of surgeons examining X-rays. And somewhere in this technological symphony, something was going very wrong. When Zara walked through the hangar doors, nobody noticed her. She'd spent years perfecting this invisibility, the way she moved through spaces without drawing attention, the way she positioned herself to observe without being observed. In her previous life, this skill had kept her alive in places where being noticed meant being dead. "Who's the hangar chief?" she asked the technician at the control desk. Her voice was calm, professional, neither subservient nor challenging, the vocal equivalent of beige wallpaper. Petty Officer Martinez looked her up and down like she was something unpleasant he'd stepped in. Late 20s, perfectly pressed uniform, the kind of military precision that came from never having been tested by actual combat. He had the particular arrogance of someone who'd been given authority but never earned respect. "Who's asking?" His tone carried the casual dismissiveness reserved for civilian contractors, necessary nuisances who made the real military personnel's jobs possible, but weren't really worth acknowledging as human beings. Meridian Systems, F-35 Avionics Evaluation. Zara extended her paperwork with the practiced patience of someone who'd learned to navigate bureaucracy without leaving fingerprints. "I have an appointment with Commander Reeves." Martinez glanced at the paperwork with the same enthusiasm most people reserved for tax documents. "Great, another middle-aged civilian here to waste our time," he muttered, loud enough for nearby personnel to hear and appreciate his wit. "Reeves is on deck, aircraft SF-07. He pointed toward the hangar depths with the same gesture he might use to direct someone to a bathroom. Zara melted into the crowd with practiced ease. This was her element. The spaces between official attention, the gaps in institutional awareness where someone with her skills could operate undetected. SF-07 sat in the far corner of the hangar like a sleeping predator. The aircraft was beautiful in the way that only weapons designed by geniuses could be. Sleek lines and matte radar-absorbing coating that seemed to bend light around its surfaces. But the group of engineers and technicians surrounding it radiated the particular tension that came from confronting the impossible. "Systems integration is here," she announced to Commander Reeves, a man in his early 40s who'd clearly dealt with enough contractors to know that most promises of technical solutions ended in disappointment and over time. "Ah, yes, Meridian." His brief assessment carried the weight of experience, someone who'd learned to manage expectations when dealing with civilian technical support. "Flight computer is running erratically, random error codes that don't match anything in our diagnostic manuals. 3 days of this." "Which systems are affected?" Zara asked, her tone suggesting professional interest rather than the burning curiosity of someone who'd helped design what they were trying to fix. "Easier to say which aren't," Reeves replied, with the tired humor of someone who'd been fighting the same battle for too long. "Avionics, weapon systems, flight controls, communications. This morning it completely crashed during pre-flight, 17 seconds from startup to total system failure." The technicians around them exchanged glances that mixed frustration with embarrassment. These were people trained to solve problems, and this problem was making them look incompetent in front of their superiors. Blake stepped forward with the eager smile of youth trying to prove itself. 22 years old, Georgia Tech graduate, his uniform still crisp enough to suggest this was his first military assignment. "Sure, ma'am. But to be honest, we've had 2 specialists from Lockheed Martin come through before you. They couldn't solve it either." The comment was delivered with the particular condescension that young engineers specialized in, the tone that suggested they were explaining quantum physics to a toddler. The surrounding group responded with the light chuckles that hierarchy expected when subordinates made jokes about people outside their chain of command. "I see," Zara replied, her voice maintaining perfect neutrality. "Can I see the system logs?" "Of course," Blake said, leading her to the diagnostic terminal with movements that suggested he was doing her an enormous favor. "But it's quite technical. Are you sure you'll understand the diagnostic readouts? If you've ever been in a situation where someone underestimated your expertise, you know the particular patience required to let them reveal their ignorance without correcting them. Share your story in the comments, because what Blake was about to witness would reshape his understanding of what expertise looked like. The diagnostic terminal displayed the kind of complex data that separated real experts from people who'd learned to navigate user interfaces. Lines of code scrolled past, error timestamps created patterns that told stories. System performance metrics painted pictures of digital distress that would be meaningless to most people. For a normal contractor, these readouts would have been incomprehensible hieroglyphics. But Zara wasn't normal, and she wasn't really a contractor. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with the fluid precision of a concert pianist, but there was something predatory in the way she navigated the system architecture. The casual snickering from the surrounding technicians died as they watched her work. This wasn't the hesitant fumbling they'd expected from another civilian consultant. This was surgical precision, carving through layers of complexity with the confidence of someone who understood the system at levels they couldn't comprehend. "Boot sequence crash," she said, her voice taking on a different quality, still professional, but with an undertone of authority that hadn't been there before. "Communication error between the main processing unit and flight control systems." "We noticed that," Blake said, though his earlier condescension had been replaced by growing uncertainty. "But we can't determine the root cause." "Firmware version 2.73, Zara said, turning the screen so others could see. "When was this installed?" "Last week. Routine update from Lockheed Martin." "No." Her voice carried the flat certainty of someone stating an objective fact. "This is a beta version. Limited test environments only. Not approved for operational aircraft." Blake pulled out his documentation with movements that had become noticeably less confident. "The update came through official channels. Lockheed confirmed it was approved." "F-35s don't receive automatic firmware updates," Zara said, her tone suggesting that anyone who knew anything about military aircraft security would understand this basic fact. "All updates require manual authentication and installation, security protocol." The silence that followed wasn't just the absence of conversation. It was the sound of assumptions crumbling, of comfortable certainties being exposed as dangerous ignorance. "Are you suggesting," Commander Reeves said carefully, "that this system has been compromised?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Zara replied. "I'm telling you that someone deliberately installed corrupted firmware on this aircraft. The question is whether they did it to steal information or to cause the kind of system failure that could kill a pilot. The alarms that suddenly filled Hangar 7 didn't sound like the routine notifications that punctuated military life. These were the shrieking warnings that meant something had gone catastrophically wrong, the kind of sound that made experienced military personnel drop whatever they were doing and prepare for the worst. Red lights bathed the hangar in the color of spilled blood, creating an atmosphere of emergency that transformed the space from a maintenance facility into a crisis command center. Technicians who'd been casually observing Zara's work suddenly scattered like startled birds, each following emergency protocols that had been drilled into them through endless training exercises. All personnel condition amber. Security breach detected. Shut down all systems immediately. Commander Reeves grabbed his radio with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned that in crisis situations, every second of delay could compound into catastrophe. Command, what's the situation? Hangar 7. We're detecting unauthorized network traffic from your position. Isolate all systems immediately and prepare for security investigation. Every eye in the hangar turned to Zara, who had already turned back to her terminal and was typing with increased urgency. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with the speed of someone defusing a bomb with seconds left on the timer. "What are you doing?" Reeves demanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd suddenly realized he might be dealing with either salvation or treason. "Tracking the outgoing data," Zara replied without looking up. Lines of code flowed across the screen. Network diagnostics, traffic analysis, digital forensics tools that existed in classified environments. "Someone is stealing classified avionics data from this system, right now. Real-time extraction." "Stop!" Blake tried to intervene, reaching for the keyboard with movements that suggested panic rather than authority. "You don't have authorization to access those security protocols." "Shut up," Zara said, and the change in her voice was like watching a mask slip away to reveal something dangerous underneath. This was no longer the patient contractor who'd absorbed their condescension. This was a command voice that expected immediate obedience. "Someone is stealing classified military secrets while you're worried about authorization protocols." The terminal screen filled with data streams that painted a picture of digital espionage in real time. Gigabytes of sensitive information flowing from their secure systems to destinations that shouldn't have been able to access them. The visualization looked like digital arterial bleeding, American military secrets pouring into foreign hands with every passing second. "How is this possible?" Reeves asked, staring at the screen with the expression of someone watching his worst professional nightmares come to life. "Because someone with inside knowledge planted hardware during what you thought was routine maintenance," Zara said, her fingers continuing to fly across the keyboard, "and they've been waiting for the right moment to activate it." Zara reached into her pocket and pulled out a phone that looked ordinary but felt different in her hand. Heavier, more substantial, the kind of device that suggested it contained capabilities most people never needed to consider. The hangar fell silent as she dialed a number that didn't exist in any public directory. When the line connected, her voice took on the formal precision of someone who understood that certain conversations were recorded, analyzed, and stored in facilities that officially didn't exist. "Falcon Base, this is Phoenix-7, requesting Zulu 7 authorization. Recognition code, Hotel November 77 Alpha." The effect of those words on the people around her was like watching a controlled detonation. Everyone in earshot stopped moving, stopped breathing, stopped existing for a moment as they processed what they'd just heard. Phoenix-7 wasn't just a call sign. It was a designation that existed in the shadowy spaces between official military operations and plausible deniability. "Yes, active status, Oceana Hangar 7, security breach in progress, understood. Standing by." When she ended the call, the silence that followed wasn't just surprise. It was the recognition that everything they thought they knew about the situation had just been revealed as incomplete at best, dangerous at worst. "Want to tell us who you are?" Reeves asked, his voice low and carrying the particular tension that came from realizing you might have been completely wrong about someone whose capabilities you'd underestimated. "What matters?" Zara replied, her attention already returned to the terminal, "is stopping this data hemorrhage. before more classified information bleeds into foreign intelligence networks. Her access level on the terminal had changed. Security protocols that hadn't existed moments before were now at her fingertips. The system recognized her now not as a civilian contractor, but as someone with clearance levels that existed above the normal military hierarchy. The screen filled with tools that looked like something from a classified nightmare: network security protocols, counterintelligence software, digital weapons designed to fight wars in cyberspace. Zara navigated these systems with the confidence of someone who'd used them before in situations where failure meant more than professional embarrassment. "Connection traced," she said, her voice carrying the focused intensity of someone conducting surgery under fire. "Traffic is routing through Chinese IP addresses, but the actual extraction point is here on base, Hangar 3. "Hangar 3 is under maintenance," Blake said, his earlier arrogance completely replaced by the bewildered confusion of someone watching their worldview collapse in real time. "It's been empty for a week." "They don't need personnel on site," Zara explained while typing commands that made the terminal respond in ways the technicians had never seen. "Hardware was planted during that maintenance period. Sophisticated equipment that's been dormant until activated remotely." She executed a command sequence, and the data streams on the screen suddenly choked off, like someone had grabbed a bleeding artery and squeezed. The visualization of stolen information flowing to foreign intelligence networks stopped abruptly, leaving only the digital equivalent of silence. "Data theft terminated," she announced. "External connections severed. But we need to secure the physical hardware before they can re-establish connection through alternative channels." Commander Reeves looked like a man watching his understanding of reality reassemble itself into an entirely different picture. "Colonel Wolfe," he said slowly, using a rank that hadn't appeared on any of her contractor documentation. "Would you care to explain how a civilian contractor has access to classified counterintelligence protocols?" Zara stepped back from the terminal, and for the first time since arriving at Oceana, she let her carefully constructed persona slip away completely. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. Her posture straightened with military precision, her voice carried authority that couldn't be faked, and her eyes held the particular intensity that came from making life-and-death decisions in situations most people couldn't imagine. "Retired Colonel Zara Wolfe, former chief test pilot for the F-35 Lightning II program," she said, and each word landed like a physical blow on the people who'd spent the morning dismissing her as irrelevant. "Project Black Diamond. 4 years of classified development work on systems so advanced that admitting they existed could destabilize international relations." The silence that followed wasn't just surprise. It was the sound of respect being born from the ashes of assumption. "I didn't just test the F-35, she continued, her voice carrying the weight of secrets that had been buried for over a decade. "I helped design every system you've been trying to fix, every line of code, every hardware integration, every security protocol. I was part of the team that created them." Blake stared at her like he was seeing a legend step out of myth and into his reality. "Project Black Diamond," he whispered. "I thought that was just rumors, classified beyond normal security levels." "Officially, it never existed," Zara confirmed. "The people who worked on it officially never existed either. After the project ended, we were given new identities, civilian careers, and instructions to disappear into normal life unless the technology we'd created was threatened." She gestured toward the terminal where traces of the cyber attack were still visible. "Today, that technology was threatened." "Why didn't you tell us who you were from the beginning?" Commander Reeves asked, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by something approaching awe. "Because the moment I revealed my true identity, I stopped being invisible," Zara replied. "For 12 years, my survival depended on being someone nobody would look at twice. Someone who could observe without being observed, who could access systems without triggering security alerts, who could move through military installations without leaving digital footprints." She looked around at the faces surrounding her, technicians who'd ignored her, engineers who'd condescended to her, officers who'd treated her as a necessary inconvenience. But sometimes survival requires sacrifice, and sometimes protecting what matters means giving up what protects you. The recognition of what she'd just given up wasn't lost on anyone in the hangar. By revealing her true identity, she'd burned 12 years of carefully constructed anonymity. The quiet contractor named Zara Wolfe would disappear, and Colonel Phoenix-7 would have to figure out how to exist in a world that knew who she really was. Blake approached with the hesitant respect of someone who'd learned that expertise didn't always announce itself with obvious credentials. "Colonel, I owe you an apology. We all do." "Don't apologize for being cautious," Zara replied. "Apologize for being closed-minded. There's a difference between healthy skepticism and willful ignorance." She began gathering her equipment, but her attention remained on the terminal where evidence of the cyber attack continued to paint pictures of digital espionage. That firmware update didn't happen by accident. Someone with intimate knowledge of F-35 systems designed this attack specifically to steal the information they needed while creating enough system instability to cover their tracks. "Someone from the original development team?" Reeves asked. "Someone who knew that exposing Phoenix-7 would be worth the intelligence they could gather," Zara confirmed. "This wasn't just a cyber attack. It was a trap designed to force me out of hiding." As news of the security breach spread through Oceana's command structure, the response was swift and comprehensive. Military police secured Hangar 3, where they discovered sophisticated hardware that had been disguised as routine maintenance equipment. Counterintelligence teams began analyzing the data that had been stolen, trying to determine how much classified information had been compromised. But perhaps the most significant change was in the way the personnel in Hangar 7 looked at Zara. The transformation from dismissed contractor to respected colleague was complete, but it came with the recognition that assumptions about people's capabilities could have catastrophic consequences. "Ma'am," Blake said as she prepared to leave, his voice carrying the particular humility that came from learning important lessons the hard way. "When you said the firmware was wrong, we should have listened immediately." "You listened eventually," Zara replied. "That's what matters. But next time someone tells you something doesn't match protocol, consider the possibility that they might know more about the protocol than you do." Commander Reeves approached with the kind of respect that was earned rather than demanded. "Colonel, what happens now? With your cover blown, where does that leave you?" Zara looked around the hangar one last time, at the F-35 that was now displaying normal system readouts, at the technicians who were learning to see expertise in unexpected places, at the evidence of digital warfare that had been happening invisible in their most secure facilities. "Now I go back to being who I really am," she said, "and hope that 12 years of hiding has prepared me for whatever comes next." As Zara walked toward the exit, her phone buzzed with a message from a number she recognized. "Package delivered. Phoenix-7 status confirmed. Welcome back to the war." She paused near the hangar entrance, watching the controlled chaos of military personnel securing the facility. Teams of investigators were already arriving, their movements precise and purposeful. She'd seen this before, the machinery of national security responding to threats most people would never know existed. Colonel Morrison appeared beside her, his expression mixing relief with concern. "Ma'am, I've been instructed to escort you to a secure debriefing facility. There are questions that need answers before you leave the base." "I figured as much," Zara replied, though her voice carried the weariness of someone who'd hoped her ghost days were behind her. "How long?" "Depends on what you tell them about Project Black Diamond, and about who else might know what you know." The implication hung between them like a loaded weapon. By revealing herself today, Zara hadn't just ended her own anonymity. She'd potentially exposed every other Phoenix program veteran who'd been living similar cover lives. The ripple effects of her decision would spread through classified networks, forcing other ghosts to either disappear deeper or surface entirely. "Before we go," she said, turning back toward the hangar where Blake and the other technicians were still processing what they'd witnessed, "I need to give them something they can use." She approached Blake, who straightened automatically when he saw her coming. The transformation in his posture was remarkable. Gone was the casual dismissiveness, replaced by the kind of attention junior officers reserved for decorated veterans whose stories they'd only heard whispered in military academies. "Blake," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd earned the right to dispense wisdom through experience rather than rank. "You're going to have a choice to make in the next few days. People are going to want to know everything about what happened here. Some of those people will be legitimate, others won't be." She handed him a card that looked ordinary but felt different, heavier, more substantial. If anyone asks you questions that feel wrong, or if you notice surveillance that doesn't seem routine, call that number. It connects to people who understand what it means to protect classified information with your life. Blake stared at the card like he was holding a piece of history. "Ma'am, will we see you again?" "Probably not as Zara Wolfe, the contractor," she replied. But Phoenix-7 has a way of showing up when systems need protecting and people need reminding that expertise doesn't always come with obvious credentials. She'd known this moment would come eventually. The kind of expertise she possessed couldn't remain hidden forever, especially in a world where technological threats were evolving faster than traditional security measures could adapt. By revealing herself today, she'd protected critical military assets, but she'd also painted a target on her back that would follow her for the rest of her life. As she walked toward the military vehicle that would take her to debriefing, she caught sight of her reflection in the hangar's reinforced windows. For 12 years, she had seen a contractor looking back at her, someone unremarkable, invisible, safe. Now she saw Phoenix-7 again, and the recognition was both terrifying and liberating. The Honda Civic she'd driven to work that morning sat in the parking lot like a memorial to a life that was ending. The suburban apartment she'd called home for over a decade would need to be abandoned. The quiet routines that had protected her anonymity were now security vulnerabilities. The identity of Zara Wolfe, contractor, would disappear into the same classified machinery that had created it. But as she thought about the young technicians in Hangar 7 who'd learned that expertise could come from unexpected sources, and the security breach that had been stopped before causing irreparable damage, she realized that some sacrifices were worth making. The debriefing facility was located in a building that didn't appear on any public maps of the naval station. Inside, she found herself facing people whose names she wasn't supposed to know and agencies that officially didn't exist. The questions came in waves. Technical details about the cyber attack, intelligence assessments about who might have orchestrated it, and strategic analyses about what other Phoenix program assets might be at risk. "Colonel Wolfe," said a woman whose badge identified her only as Dr. Chen, DOD analysis. "We need to understand whether today's events were targeted specifically at exposing Phoenix-7, or whether you were collateral damage in a broader intelligence operation." Zara considered the question carefully. In her experience, the truth about classified operations was rarely simple, and the motivations behind cyber attacks could be layered like Russian nesting dolls. The sophistication of the attacks suggests someone with intimate knowledge of F-35 systems. The timing suggests they knew exactly when and how to trigger my exposure. This wasn't opportunistic. It was designed. Which means, added a man identified only as Agent Rivera, that someone has been tracking Phoenix program personnel for years, waiting for the right moment to force you out of hiding. The implications were staggering. If foreign intelligence agencies had been systematically identifying and tracking Phoenix veterans, then every person who'd worked on classified projects over the past 2 decades might be at risk. The careful anonymity that had protected them could be crumbling across multiple fronts. "There's something else," Zara said, remembering details from the cyber attack that had seemed peripheral at the time. "The malware signature. I've seen variations of it before. Not in military systems, but in civilian infrastructure attacks that were attributed to state actors. Whoever did this has been testing their methods on non-military targets first." The room fell silent as the analysts processed this information. If the same groups attacking civilian infrastructure were now targeting military systems, it suggested a level of strategic coordination that went beyond typical cyber espionage. Sometimes protecting what matters means giving up what protects you. Sometimes the greatest service happens when no one knows you're serving, and sometimes, when the moment demands it, ghosts have to become visible again. Have you ever had to reveal a hidden skill or identity when the situation demanded it? Tell us in the comments about a time when staying invisible was no longer an option, because the choice between safety and service is one that defines who we really are. The debriefing lasted 4 hours. When it ended, Zara emerged into an evening that looked the same as when she'd entered, but felt fundamentally different. The world knew Phoenix-7 existed again, which meant the world she'd carefully constructed for 12 years was ending. But as she was escorted to a secure transport that would take her to a safe house she'd hoped never to need, she felt something she hadn't experienced in over a decade, the satisfaction of using her real skills for their intended purpose. For 12 years, she'd been in hiding. Now she was back in the fight. The drive away from Oceana took her past the same security checkpoint where the guard had barely acknowledged her that morning. This time, he snapped to attention and saluted. Word had already spread about the events in Hangar 7. The transformation from invisible contractor to recognized expert was complete, irreversible, and absolutely necessary. In her rearview mirror, Naval Air Station Oceana grew smaller, but the impact of what had happened there would ripple through military security protocols for years to come. Because 17 seconds had revealed more than just a cyber attack. They'd revealed the dangerous consequences of underestimating the quiet professionals who keep the world's most critical systems running. And somewhere in the classified files that would be generated from today's events, a new chapter would be written in the legend of Phoenix-7, the ghost who came back from retirement to remind everyone that the most dangerous people are often the ones you never see coming.